They told her she'd bend or they'd watch her starve. They didn't count on him. A man with no kin, no ties, just a past too heavy to share. But when he saw her children's hollow eyes, he knew what he had to do. He didn't need saving, but maybe they did. The first scream didn't come from a child, it came from the mother. May Sullivan clawed at the latch on the barn door with fingers blistered and raw, her other hand shoving the weight of her youngest forward. Josie, no more than 6, who tumbled through the open crack into the shadows. May shoved in after her, then turned and heaved the door shut just as the whip cracked behind them. Wood splintered against wood. She locked the door from inside with a rusted beam, breathing hard, the sound of horses and men shouting muffled just beyond. "Josie, stay quiet, baby," she whispered, her voice broken and dry. The little girl didn't speak, only curled tighter, into the hay, eyes wide and wet. Outside, the riders circled the house, flames already dancing along the porch roof, the dry wood eager to take the spark. May knew they'd be back for the barn next. They'd made that clear last week, said they'd take her home piece by piece if she didn't sign the land over, told her the law would never side with a woman, not one raising 4 mouths alone, not one who still wore her wedding ring even though William Sullivan had been dead over a year. May crouched lower in the straw beside her daughter. The stench of fear and sweat clung to her skin, her arms trembling though she held herself still. She'd sent her eldest, Eli, just 13, running with the twins toward the creek before sunrise, told them to hide, no matter what they heard. And now, alone with Josie, she closed her eyes and prayed the smoke wouldn't find them here. The pounding hooves faded, a pause, then the groan of timber as the roof began to fall. May didn't cry. There was no water left in her, only grit. By morning, the house was ash. When May pushed the barn door open again, dragging Josie into a world painted grey with soot, there was nothing left. No porch, no table, no cradle. The only thing standing was the barn. For now. They walked, barefoot down the ridge toward the creek, the hem of May's dress blackened and her breath short. And when they found Eli standing knee-deep in the water, holding each of the twins by the hand, May almost collapsed. The 4 of them huddled in, silence beneath a sycamore, limbs shaking, stomachs empty. The last of the potatoes had gone to the twins 2 nights ago. May had gone without for longer, and the well behind the house had been poisoned weeks back. This was what they meant by breaking her, not just with fire or fists, but by watching her children waste, and that's when he saw them. A 1/4 mile away, atop a hill choked in winter grass, a man on horseback sat still, watching. The horse was black, the man darker still, in shadow and silence. May saw him first. She rose like a wounded deer, shielding the children behind her, though her hands trembled. He didn't move. Not until she swayed from hunger and dropped to her knees. Then he rode. His name was Silas Brandt. He came down the slope like he'd done it 100 times, slow, cautious, boots steady in the stirrups. May didn't know him, but she didn't have to. The rifle strapped to his saddle and the scar trailing down his jaw said enough. He wasn't from around here, and he didn't scare easy. Silas stopped 10 feet from them, didn't dismount, didn't speak, just looked at her, at the soot on her skin, the child clutching her sleeve, the way her knees buckled again as she stood to face him. May opened her mouth to speak, to beg maybe, but no sound came. "I saw the fire," he said finally, voice rough, quiet, like it didn't get much use. "Saw the men ride out," she nodded slowly, arms tightening around Josie. He looked past her then, at the children, then back again. "You got anywhere to go?" It took her a full second to shake her head. He said nothing more. Just dismounted, untied the small sack strapped behind his saddle and set it on the ground between them. Bread, dried meat, apples that had wrinkled but not rotted. "For the kids," he said. Then he turned, climbed back onto the horse. May dropped to her knees again, tears stinging her eyes now. Josie didn't wait. She dug into the sack with tiny fingers, stuffing bread into her mouth, crying as she chewed. The twins followed. Eli stood last, eyes wary but starving too. May looked up just in time to see the man pause at the hilltop, again, just for a moment. Then he rode west. He returned the next morning. They were still there, curled beneath the sycamore. She hadn't slept. The children had, but fitfully, and now, as dawn cracked and frost clung to their lashes, May looked up and saw him again. This time, he brought more than food. "I've got space," Silas said simply, eyes locked on hers. "And a barn." May didn't move. "I ain't asking you to trust me. Just not asking you to die here." She looked at her children. Josie's lips were blue. Eli looked thinner than yesterday. May stood. They followed him back along the ridge, past the blackened husk of what was once her life. His ranch sat in a low valley bordered by scrub oak and rock. Nothing fancy, a fence half fallen, a house that leaned a little east, but the well ran clear and the barn smelled of hay, not smoke. Inside, he laid out blankets, started a fire, fed them more than bread. May didn't speak much, neither did he. But when she woke the next morning to the sound of the twins laughing, something inside her cracked, and not from pain. She found him mending a fence post, sleeves, rolled, hat low. "I'll work for what you give us," she said, voice steady now. He didn't look up, just nodded. "You'll stay in the house," he said after a moment. "Barn's too cold." "I ain't your wife," May said quickly, chest tight. "Didn't say you were." Silence stretched. "But the kids shouldn't sleep in hay," he added, and that was that. They didn't ask each other's pasts, but they both carried too much. May learned that Silas had once had land in Dakota, lost it in a flood, or maybe it was fire. He didn't say which, just that he'd come here to forget something. And that forgetting never really worked. He learned that May didn't cry. Not even when Josie got sick the second week from old water. May stayed up all night, wiping her brow, holding her close, whispering songs. Silas had found her in the morning, half asleep, but still holding on. "She's strong," he said. "She has to be," May replied, but nothing stayed quiet forever. One morning, Eli came back from the creek pale and shaking. They were there, he said, eyes wide. The men, Matthew Crane and his sons. May's blood turned to ice. Silas set down his tools slowly. "Did they see you?" Eli nodded. "I think so." May felt the walls closing again. "They said we were dead," Eli whispered. "Said Mama's ghost must be walking." Silas walked to the barn, came back with the rifle. "We've got time," he said, jaw clenched. "But not much." May looked at him then. Really looked. The scar. The silence. The way he stood like a man already bracing for a storm. And for the first time since William died, she didn't feel alone. She felt something else entirely. Safe. Which made what came next hurt even more. Because 2 nights later, while the children slept and Silas stood, guard by the porch, a single shot rang out, and May saw the shadow fall behind him. The gunshot didn't drop Silas, but it knocked him sideways, and for a second, May thought he was dead. His body twisted, slumped against the porch post, one hand still gripping the rifle. The shot had come from the tree line, just past the edge of the field. She didn't scream. She couldn't. Not with Josie and the twins asleep in the loft. Not with Eli clutching her arm, eyes wide. She pressed him back through the door, told him in a whisper to bar it, then crouched by the window. Silas moved, barely, but it was enough. He crawled behind the water trough, dragging one leg. May couldn't see the wound, only the smear of blood across the boards. Then another shot split the air, cracking through the dark, but it hit the porch rail instead. Splinters flew. She ducked lower. Her breath came hard now, her heart hammering like a fist inside her throat. She had never fired a rifle in her life. She didn't even know if Silas kept another one inside. But then she saw him raise his hand, a gesture, sharp, almost angry, and he pointed toward the barn, not the house. May hesitated, then understood. She turned and pulled Eli close, her voice low and tight. "Wake the twins. Wrap them in blankets. You carry Josie. You do not stop running till you're behind the barn. Do you hear me?" He nodded, silent. She grabbed the tin of matches from the hearth, shoved it into her pocket, then pulled down the quilt from the peg and wrapped it tight around her youngest, who'd barely stirred. The wind outside carried the next bullet wide. It hit the fence somewhere, maybe a warning, maybe just a blind shot in the dark. But May didn't wait for another. She threw open the back door and bolted. The grass was frostbitten and sharp underfoot, but she didn't feel it. She was already at the barn door, throwing it wide as Eli and the twins caught up behind her. They piled inside, breath visible, and May shoved the door closed just as another shot rang out behind them. She lit the lamp. The hayloft smelled of horse and dust, cold, but dry. Safe enough for now. She climbed to the top and laid the children down, kissed their foreheads, then looked back through the slats at the house. Silas wasn't behind the trough anymore. May felt her stomach pitch. He was standing. Now, barely. Rifle braced against the post. He fired once, then twice. Return fire came from the trees. Sparks flew off the water barrel. She wanted to scream for him to get inside, to stop trying to protect a family that wasn't his. But then she saw it. A second figure, slinking low behind the fence line, a man with a hat pulled low and a pistol in his belt. Coming from the side. May's hand tightened around the pitchfork leaning against the stall. She hadn't prayed since William died, but something like a prayer rose up in her then, bitter and silent. She moved fast. She reached the side door of the barn just as the stranger rounded the corner of the house, heading towards Silas's blind side. May didn't wait. She stepped out, pitchfork raised, and drove it forward with every ounce of fury and fear and desperation left in her body. The man screamed. The gun fell from his hand. Silas turned, rifle half lowered, and froze at the sight. May stood over the man, chest heaving, the tines buried in his side. The scream had stopped. There was only gurgling now. May dropped the fork and fell to her knees, hands shaking. Silas limped over, his leg bleeding, and crouched beside her. "You all right?" He rasped. She nodded, barely. He looked at the man. "Matthew's son, Warren. Is he?" May couldn't finish the question. Silas reached out, checked the pulse. "Not anymore." She shuddered. "I'll get rid of him," Silas said, standing with effort. "Go back to the kids." But May didn't move. She stared at the man's body like it might rise again. Her breath wouldn't settle. Silas touched her shoulder. "You did what you had to." The words meant nothing. Not yet. They buried the body in the dry creek bed before sunrise. Silas wrapped his wound and said he didn't need a doctor. May didn't argue. There wasn't one close enough anyway. The children stayed quiet that day. Josie curled in May's lap like she had when she was a baby, sucking her thumb. The twins watched the door. Eli sat with the rifle on his knees, eyes scanning the horizon. No more shots came, but the fear didn't leave. By the end of the week, the snow came. Hard. The ranch was cut off for days. Wind howled through the valley, piling drifts against the barn, the windows frosted thick. May rationed everything: flour, beans, the last of the apples Silas had brought weeks ago. The children didn't complain. They knew better now. Silas spent most of those days on the porch, rifle across his lap, eyes watching the tree line. Sometimes May brought him coffee. They didn't talk much, but the silence between them changed. It wasn't as hollow anymore. Sometimes he looked at her like he was trying to say something he didn't know how to say. Sometimes she looked back the same way. When the storm passed, May found the chickens frozen, 3 out of 5 dead. the rest sickly. Silas cursed under his breath. "We need supplies." "There's a town, 8 miles east," May said. "But they're the ones that sold me out." "We'll go west." "You think they'll sell to you?" He looked at her. "I'll make them." She didn't ask what that meant. He left at dawn, bundled in his coat, horse saddled, rifle tied to the saddle horn. May stood in the doorway, watching him go. The snow crunched beneath the hooves, and then he was gone over the ridge. He didn't come back that night, or the next. May kept the fire going, kept the children fed on thin soup and tighter prayers. She told them Silas was fine, that he was smart, careful. But by the third night, the wind howled again, and May's faith broke. She stood by the window till the lamp burned low, and then she heard it. Hooves. Not one horse. 3. May backed away from the glass. Eli stepped beside her, pale. "You, get the kids," she said, voice flat. "Back to the barn." He didn't argue. She took the rifle, the same one Silas had carried. She stood at the door, pulse racing. The horses stopped outside, and a voice, familiar, snake-slick, called out, "May Sullivan, you're alive after all. Matthew Crane." She gripped the rifle tighter. "You killed my son," he said, "and you're gonna pay." The door shuddered under a boot. May raised the rifle. She didn't plan to survive, only to buy the children time. But then another sound split the night, a shout and gunfire. Not from the porch, from the trees. May dropped to the floor as bullets tore through the door. She crawled to the window and saw one of Crane's men fall from his horse, chest blown wide. Then a second shot hit the porch post, and then, through the chaos, she saw him, Silas, bleeding still, limping, but alive. He fired again. Crane turned to run. Didn't make it. Silas stepped over the body, gun smoking, face like stone. May met him at the door. He leaned into the frame, weak. "Miss me?" he asked, then collapsed. Silas didn't wake for 2 days. May cleaned the blood from his side, wrapped the new wound tight as she could, and kept a fire going that never dipped too low. The children were quiet around him. Josie poked her head into the room every hour, as if checking to see if his chest still rose and fell. The twins whispered when they walked. Even Eli, who'd grown into a boy half made of suspicion, stood watch at the door with the rifle across his knees. May didn't sleep. She kept the pot warm, boiled cloth to clean the wound again and again. Every time he stirred, she sat up straighter, thinking it might be the moment he opened his eyes. But it wasn't. Not yet. Not until the second morning, when the frost on, the windows began to melt, and the sun came through in pale streaks. He moved his hand first, then his lips. She leaned close. "Where are they?" he murmured. May blinked. "The children." Crane, his men. "Gone. Dead. Or ran. You killed." 2. I buried them behind the barn." He didn't react to that. Only closed his eyes again like he was checking every part of himself before trusting the world again. When he opened them, he looked at her for a long while. "You stayed." May laughed, too tired to stop the bitterness in it. "Where would I have gone?" His eyes drifted closed again, but not in sleep this time. She could see him thinking, working something out behind that heavy brow. "I got you salt, flour, rice. It's in the bags." She nodded. "You rode." "West?" He coughed, winced. "Southwest. Got into a fight at the trading post. They tried to short me." "Of course they did." He glanced at her. "I didn't kill them. I didn't ask if you had." He let out a slow breath, then looked around the room. "How long?" 2 days. "That why your eyes look like that?" She rose. "Get your rest, Silas." But as she turned to go, he caught her hand. "Thank you," he said. She didn't answer, just squeezed his fingers once and slipped out. 3 more days passed before he could walk. Not far, not for long, but enough to get to the porch and sit beside Eli, who hadn't stopped guarding the house since the attack. May brought them coffee and leaned in the doorway as they sat in silence. Never seen someone hit a man like that. With a pitchfork, Silas said finally. May raised a brow. You don't know many women. That earned a small smile. You were brave, he said. No, she replied. I was desperate. He didn't argue, just sipped the coffee and stared at the horizon. That night, after the children were asleep and the fire burned low, Silas stood in the kitchen holding a faded piece of paper. May didn't ask at first, but when he didn't move, she crossed to him. What's that? He handed it over. A wanted poster, years old, browned at the edges. Silas Ward. Murder, theft, desertion. $500 dead or alive. May's throat went tight. She looked at him. I was 21, he said. Wrong crowd, wrong choices. And now? I don't know, he admitted. Trying to be better. Most days, I don't even know what that means. May handed the paper back without flinching. You saved my children. He folded it, once, twice, and tucked it into the stove's flames. They watched it curl to ash in silence. Spring came early that year. The snow melted fast, turning the path to mud, the fields to slick chaos. May spent her days planting, working the earth with blistered hands. Silas helped when he could, though the limp was worse now. He walked with a cane some mornings. Eli followed him everywhere, asking questions about horses and fences, and what kind of wood lasted longest in the rain. Silas answered everyone. The twins built forts out of firewood. Josie clung to May's skirts but smiled more now, and once even laughed, something that hadn't happened since William died. May lay awake some nights and listened to the wind and the children breathing. It was the closest to peace she'd known in years, but peace doesn't last. Not out here. The new threat didn't come with a gun or a gang. It came with a notice nailed to the front gate, scrawled in bold red ink. Property claimed by First Bank of Elm Ridge. Failure to pay will result in seizure. May read it twice, then again, her hands trembling. She found Silas in the barn. He took one look at the paper and cursed low. I thought the deed was in William's name. It was, May said. But the debt came after. He borrowed to try and buy seed, medicine. I didn't know how much. Silas looked down at the notice. They won't wait. No, she agreed. They never do. They rode into town that afternoon, just May and Silas. The streets were quiet, too quiet, as if the town had heard they were coming. Heads turned, doors closed, eyes followed. May straightened her shoulders. They entered the bank together. The clerk, Harlan Judd, a man with teeth, like corn and a heart made of salt, didn't even look up. You got payment? He asked. No, May said. I came to talk. No talking once the ink's dry. You'll throw out 5 children? She asked. Not my problem. Silas stepped forward. Then maybe this is. He laid a pouch on the counter, heavy, full. Judd opened it. His eyes widened at the weight of silver inside. That ain't enough, he said automatically, though his voice had shifted. It's half, Silas replied. The rest in 1 month. And if you don't? Then I come back. May watched the man squirm. Finally, Judd nodded. 1 month. They didn't shake hands. On the ride back, May was quiet. You had that kind of silver? She asked finally. Silas didn't look at her. It was my burying money. May's throat ached. You shouldn't have. I ain't planning on dying just yet. She blinked hard. When he finally looked over, she was wiping her cheek with her sleeve. May, I'm fine, she said quickly. Just the wind. But there wasn't any wind. The next few weeks passed in a strange kind of rhythm. May worked the fields. Silas repaired the roof, the fence, the old cart that hadn't moved in years. The children grew louder again, braver. Eli stopped sleeping with the rifle beside his bed. The twins planted a tree behind the barn. Josie began calling Silas Papa by accident, then didn't correct herself the next time. May didn't say anything about it, neither did Silas, but he smiled when she did. Then, one night, a rider came. Not fast, not loud, just steady hoofbeats after dusk. May stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand, Silas behind her. The man who dismounted was dressed in grey, a star on his chest. "Marshal," Silas said, jaw tight. "Silas Ward." May stepped in front of him. "You can't have him," she said. "I'm not here for him," the marshal said, slowly. "Not yet." May narrowed her eyes. "I came to warn him," the marshal added. "Word's out. The poster's been passed around again. Fresh reward. Double." "Who?" Silas asked. "Someone who remembers," the marshal said. "A bounty man out of Silver Bluff. Fast. Mean. And he don't care what he hits, long as he." "It's breathing." May felt her heart twist. The marshal looked at her. "You got kids here?" "Yes." "Then get ready," he said. "He won't knock, and he won't wait." He rode off without another word. Silas stared at the empty path. For a long time May looked at him. "Run?" "No," he said quietly. "Not anymore." That night, Silas stood in the barn, cleaning the rifle. May came in behind him. "You're not alone," she said. He paused. "Didn't think I was." "You saved us." He turned. "So now I save you," she added. They stared at each other, across the hay-dusted air, across all the things they hadn't said. He set the rifle down and stepped closer. She didn't move. Didn't need to. His hands trembled when they touched her face. Hers didn't. They kissed like people who didn't know if they'd see morning. The knock came just before dawn. Not a hard one. No fists, no shouting. Just a slow, steady tapping. Rhythmic. Measured. May was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around a tin mug of coffee she hadn't sipped. Her eyes found Silas immediately. He was in the corner, boot halfway on, pistol already holstered. He nodded once and she rose. The children were upstairs. Still, for now. Silas moved to the door, gun low but ready. May stood a few feet back, the rifle leaning against the table beside her. The knock came again and again. Silas opened the door. A man stood there, tall and thin, with a coat that looked more dust than fabric. His face was worn from wind and age and long roads, but the eyes were sharp, vicious, unblinking. His hat shadowed the top half of his face, but the glint of a badge-shaped pin on his chest caught the faint morning light. "You're Ward," the man said. "I am. Name's Boone. I'll get right to it." He pulled a poster from inside his coat and held it up. May didn't have to see the words to know what it was. Boone flicked it once with his fingers. "Price went up. They want you more than they did last time." "You always come knocking first?" Silas asked. Boone smiled. "Only when there's children. I'm not heartless." May moved then, a single step forward. "And if I asked you to leave?" "I'd say no," Boone said. "But I'd admire the fire." "You fire that gun anywhere near my children," she began. "I don't shoot first, Mom," Boone cut in. "Not unless I'm lied to." Silas stepped out onto the porch, letting the door close behind him. The air between the two men went taut. "You want the truth?" Silas asked. "I did what they said I did." Boone tilted his head. "Thing is," Silas continued, "what that poster don't say is that the man I killed had already broken a girl's ribs, shot her dog, and tried to do worse." "That part's not in the reward description," Boone replied calmly. "No," Silas agreed. "Justice never pays as well as vengeance." A long silence. Boone tucked the poster back into his coat. "I'll give you a day," he said, "to get your affairs in order, or leave. After that, I'll come back. And if you're still here, I'll do what I came to do." He turned, mounted his horse, and rode off without waiting for a reply. May opened the door again, slowly. "What now?" she asked. "We work," Silas said. That day was the longest they'd known. May prepared the house like a fortress, shutters, barred, windows reinforced with boards, the children taught where to hide and what not to touch. Eli followed Silas around the yard like a shadow, helping however he could. Josie cried when May showed her the crawl space under the floorboards. "What if you don't come get me?" she asked. May knelt. "I will, no matter what." Boone hadn't lied about the deadline. He rode back just after dawn the next day, and, this time, he didn't knock. The front fence gave way first. 2 shots blew apart the gate hinge, and then the hoofbeats came like thunder. Silas was already crouched behind the porch railing, rifle up, eyes sharp. May was at the upstairs window with her own rifle balanced on the sill. Eli was tucked in the root cellar with the twins, and Josie, the door barred behind them. Boone wasn't, alone. 3 others rode in. Mercenaries, hired guns by the look of them. One with a red bandana, another missing an eye, the third tall and cruel-faced with a shotgun slung lazy in one hand. May didn't wait. She fired first. The man with the red bandana fell backward off his horse, yelping like a kicked dog. Silas picked off the one-eyed man before he got 10 feet past the barn. Then it was Boone and the tall one. Boone dismounted slowly. His gun stayed holstered. Silas shouted, "You can still turn back." "No," Boone said. "I can't." The tall man raised his shotgun and fired. The porch railing exploded in splinters, and Silas rolled aside, firing twice in return. One shot hit the man's leg, sent him crashing into the mud with a howl. Boone didn't flinch. He walked forward slowly, arms wide. "I'm not here to hurt the children," he shouted. May fired again. Missed. "I just want what's owed," he shouted. "What's owed?" Silas growled, reloading. "Ain't worth a child's tears." Boone stopped. "Then you should have died years ago, Ward." Silas stood fully. And, "Miss this," he said, gesturing toward the house. "You must be out of your damn mind." Boone moved fast then, faster than a man his age should. The pistol came up, and the crack of the shot was deafening. Silas spun as the bullet grazed his shoulder. May fired again. Boone stumbled, clutching his side. Silas didn't hesitate. He crossed the yard, grabbed the rifle Boone had dropped, and pointed it at the man's chest. "Try again," he said. Boone coughed. "You gonna kill me in front of your woman?" Silas looked back at the house. Then he lowered the gun. "No," he said. "You're gonna leave, and you're gonna tell whoever sent you that Ward's dead. He died out here, in the mud. The man who lives here now has a different name." Boone looked up at him through gritted teeth. "Why would I lie for you?" "Because you owe the children that," May said from the porch, voice cold and steady. Boone didn't answer for a long time. Then he rose, slow and hunched, blood soaking his coat. "You're both fools," he said. "We know," May replied. Boone walked away, limping, dragging his pride behind him like a broken chain. The tall man followed him, hobbling and cursing. The third was dead, and they didn't look back to collect him. For the next week, they lived like ghosts. The children came out only during the day. May kept one hand near her rifle always. Silas watched the road like it might bite, but no one came. No lawmen, no bounty hunters, no bankers, not even Boone. And slowly, life returned. The crops began to sprout. The chickens laid again. Silas fixed the west fence with Eli, while the twins helped May bake bread. Josie asked if they could keep the goat that wandered in from the hills. They named it Button. May sat on the porch one evening and watched her family, because that's what they were now, in every way that mattered. Silas joined her, silent for a while. Then, "Boone won't be the last. I know. You sure about this?" May looked at him. "You fed my children. You bled for them. You stayed. You think I'm scared of the rest of the world now?" He reached for her hand. She let him. That night, after the children were asleep, Silas went to the attic. He pulled the old chest from the corner, the one with his past folded into it like a storm waiting to be stirred. He opened it. The old pistol. The journal. The locket. The letter he'd never sent. He held each for a moment, then set them down. And at the very bottom, the last thing. A deed. Not the farm. A different parcel. One far off. In the hills. Unused. Unclaimed. Still in his name. He smiled. Maybe the future didn't have to be a fight. Maybe they could grow something more than crops. The heat came fast that summer. Unforgiving. Dry. The kind of sun that cracked lips and warped fence posts and pulled even the strongest trees into a bow. But the fields still grew, stubborn and slow, and May Rose moved through them with her, skirts hitched up, sweat on her brow, and a baby goat at her heels. Button followed her like a second shadow. It made the twins laugh, and God knew they needed reasons to laugh. By the time harvest crept in, earlier than expected, cautious and meagre, there was food in the pantry again. Not enough to make them feel rich, but enough to sleep without, the growl of hunger curling inside them. Enough to sit together on the porch at night, sharing cornbread and cold coffee and stories no one had the heart to tell when winter had been clawing at their backs. Josie learned to read under the oil lamp, her little finger dragging across the pages of books Silas had found in an abandoned schoolhouse down the road. Eli took to whittling with the focus of a preacher, gifting each of them little animals carved from pine, a coyote for Josie, a cow for May, and a bear for Silas. The twins clapped and chased chickens and made up their own names for the stars. Still, even in all that warmth, the air held something uneasy. Silas knew it first. He could feel it in the way the horses started skittish, in the way strangers passed by the ranch too slow. There weren't words for it, not yet, but it was like a drumbeat in the distance, steady, deliberate, drawing closer. He didn't say much at first, just started walking the perimeter more often, started sleeping a little lighter. But May noticed, she always did. One evening, she found him by the west fence, hammer loose in his hand, looking out toward the ridge. The sun was bleeding down behind the hills, spilling gold across the dry grass. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer, right away. "I don't know," he said finally. "But something's coming." She didn't ask what. There was no need. They both knew peace didn't last long for people like them. It arrived the next morning. A letter, hand-delivered by a boy no older than Josie, riding a mule with its ribs showing. He wouldn't say who sent him, just passed Silas the envelope, turned, and rode off without a word. The paper was thick, wax-sealed, with handwriting that made Silas feel sick before he even read the first line. The name at the bottom, Thaddeus Marrow, hit him like a fist to the gut. He sat on the porch with it in his lap for a long time. May came out with a dish towel slung over her shoulder and stopped short when she saw his face. "Old friend?" she asked. He shook his head. "Old debt." That night, when the children were asleep and the crickets chirped loud enough to cover the tremble in his voice, Silas told her everything. About Marrow, about how they'd ridden together once, in the days before Silas tried to live right. About how Marrow didn't believe in mercy, only fear. About how they'd parted ways after a fire left a town smouldering and 3 girls missing, and Silas had ridden away from that mess with blood on his boots and a vow never to speak his name again. He ran numbers for the old rail kings, Silas said. Burned ranches that refused to sell. Bought out sheriffs like candy. He was poison. Why's he writing now? Silas opened the letter again, eyes moving over the words like they might change if he blinked hard enough. "He wants me to work for him again," he said. "Says there's a job, one I can't refuse." May's jaw tensed. "Then we refuse it. He says he'll burn us out if we do." The silence after that was heavy. Just the sound of night bugs and the creak of the windmill turning. Then May said, "We didn't survive all this just to kneel now." "No," Silas said, looking up at her. "We didn't." 3 days later, the smoke rose from the neighboring ranch. The Boyles' place. Silas and May rode out before noon and found the land scorched, the barns still smouldering. No sign of the Boyles themselves, just a broken doll at the edge of the well and a silver coin nailed to the gatepost. Silas recognized the coin. Marrow's calling card. The message was clear: obey or watch others fall. That night, May sat beside the children's beds until they slept. She held Josie's hand long, after her fingers went slack with dreams. When she finally came back downstairs, Silas was already saddling the horse. "You're going?" she asked. "I have to. If I don't, he'll keep doing this." "You think showing up will stop him?" "I think showing up's the only way, to keep him from hurting someone else." May crossed the room and took his hand. "Then I'm coming with you." He looked down at her, fingers tightening around hers. "No," he said. "You stay. If something happens to me." "Then you better not let anything happen," she said. He rode out before dawn. The place Marrow had chosen for their meeting was a dead mining town 30 miles east, just splinters and rust now, with a church steeple still standing like a broken tooth. Silas arrived by midday, tied his horse, waited. Marrow came at sunset. He looked exactly as Silas remembered: thin, snake-like, skin tight across sharp cheekbones, smile like a knife's edge. He wore a velvet coat and rode a black stallion that didn't blink. "Ward," he said, spreading his arms like they were old friends. Silas didn't smile. "Marrow, I see you got my letter." "I read it, burned it." Marrow chuckled. "Well, I'm here anyway." "What do you want?" Marrow circled him slow. "Same as always. Obedience, loyalty, results. I told you years ago I was done. You're never done, Silas. You just hit pause. I've got a family. Now, even better. Makes you easier to control." Silas stepped in close, voice low. "You touch one hair on any of them." "Oh, I won't," Marrow said, raising both hands. "Not if you play nice. I've got a job up north. Big money. Land grab. I need someone who can handle persuasion." "No." "You sure?" "Dead sure." Marrow tilted his head. "Shame. That means we're enemies again." "We always were." Marrow didn't argue, just smiled, then reached into his coat and pulled out a small photograph of the Boyle family, tied up, alive, for now. "You have 2 days," Marrow said, and turned to leave. Silas didn't ride home right away. He went east instead, through the dry hills, past the broken tracks, and down to an old shack where a man named Preacher lived. Not a real preacher, just a man with a voice like thunder and a memory full of sins. Preacher owed him. They talked for hours, about the past, about Marrow, about fire. When Silas left, it was with a new saddlebag full of dynamite. He rode home in silence, the wind cold against his face, the sky black with coming storm. When he stepped through the door just past midnight, May was awake. She stood in the kitchen, hands flour-dusted from baking, a pistol at her hip. "Well?" she asked. "They took the Boyles. Alive?" "For now." She looked at the saddlebag. "What's the plan?" Silas didn't answer for a moment. Then he said, "We burn Marrow out." May nodded once. "Then let's get to work." They worked through the night. No time for second guesses. No time for fear. Just action. Clean. Fast. Ruthless. The way only people who've already lost everything can act. May went through the pantry and packed every jar of food that could. Travel, knowing full well that if this didn't work, none of it would matter. She loaded bullets into the rifle the same way she'd once packed sugar into jars. Quick, careful, no wasted motion. Josie was the only one who asked questions. "Where are you going?" she whispered. May knelt beside her, fingers brushing hair from her daughter's eyes. "Nowhere far, baby. Just helping Mr. Silas clean up a mess someone made." Josie nodded, though she didn't understand. She clutched the wooden coyote Eli had carved and didn't let go even in her sleep. Silas laid out the map across the kitchen. Table. 3 spots circled in red: the ridge, the old water tower, and the mine road. Marrow would travel fast, always did, but Silas knew his habits, knew the way his men moved. They'd keep the Boyles in the box canyon near Copper Ridge because there were no exits but one, and they thought no one would be crazy enough to storm in from the front. But Silas wasn't storming in. He was collapsing the canyon. Preacher. It gave me enough dynamite to crack the earth, Silas said, unrolling the fuse line. We don't have to kill them all, just trap them long enough to get the Boyles out. May didn't blink. Let's do it. They left the children with old Merla, the widow down the hill, who hadn't seen war since the Sioux raids, but still kept her grandfather's saber under the bed. May kissed each of the kids goodbye while Silas stood silent near the door, fingers twitching. By the time they were in the saddle, the sun had barely peeked over the horizon. The sky was a dull red, like a warning. Or maybe just a promise. They didn't talk on the ride. Too much to say, not enough room for it. When they reached the ridge, Silas pulled up short. We split here. I go up the canyon. You take the high road with the scope. If anything goes sideways, I fire. He met her eyes. You sure about this? I'm more sure about this than I was about marrying my first husband, May said. And I did that barefoot with a fever. He almost smiled. Almost. Marrow's men were exactly where Silas expected. Half drunk, loud, and cocky. Guarding. The canyon mouth with rifles slung low, like they were more interested in bragging to each other than watching the cliffs. He crawled along the ridge above them, dynamite tied to his back, each breath timed to their laughter. He didn't recognize these men, just hired guns, the kind who followed money, not names. But one voice carried different. Down in the canyon, itself, just past the curve, stood Marrow, hat tipped back, boots polished, smiling as he held a match between his teeth. Tell me, Mr. Boyle, he said to the man tied up beside the wagon, you ever see a man burn for pride? Mr. Boyle spat at him. Marrow laughed, then lit the match. Silas lit his fuse at the same time. The explosion didn't just shake the ground, it split it. May watched from the cliff's edge as the canyon mouth caved in. Rocks tumbled like thunder, burying the guards in a cloud of dust and screams. Horses scattered. Marrow's voice cut through it all, sharp and furious. Ward! Silas dropped into the chaos like a ghost, rifle first, shooting out the ropes that held the Boyles before anyone could react. Mr. Boyle went for his wife. Silas grabbed the child and shouted, Run! They ran. Marrow spun, gun drawn, but May's shot took it clean out of his hand. He screamed, clutching the shattered bones. She fired again, grazed his shoulder. Thirds between your eyes if you don't drop, she shouted from above. Marrow froze, then smiled. You always had good taste in women, Ward, he called. Too bad you won't live to enjoy it. Then he ran. Not toward the trap Silas had built, but deeper into the canyon. Silas didn't hesitate. He chased. The deeper part of the canyon was narrow, winding. Shadows fell long even at midday. Silas kept low, rifle up, heart hammering like a drum in his ears. He found blood first, drops, then a smear along a rock wall, then nothing, until the voice came. You know what your problem is, Silas, Marrow's voice echoed. Hard to place, impossible to pin down. You keep pretending you're something you're not, like you can wash off what you did, like any of us get clean. Silas kept moving. Maybe if you'd stuck with me, Marrow continued, you'd be running this whole godforsaken territory by now. You could have had land, power, men who jumped when you snapped your fingers. Silas found the edge of a broken ravine, dropped to one knee. But instead, Marrow said, stepping into the open with a second pistol drawn, you picked a widow and some starving kids. Silas raised his rifle. Marrow fired first. The bullet caught Silas in the shoulder, spinning, him backward. He hit the dirt hard, teeth rattling. The rifle flew from his hand. Marrow walked forward slowly, eyes bright with hate. You never did know how to finish what you started. Then a second shot rang out. May, From the ridge. Marrow staggered back, hit in the thigh. He collapsed with a howl, dropped his pistol, scrambled for it. Silas crawled forward, blood soaking through his shirt. By the time Marrow's fingers brushed the pistol grip again, Silas was already on him. He grabbed the gun and turned it, pressed it to Marrow's chest. "Do it," Marrow hissed, blood between his teeth. Silas stared at him, then stood and threw the gun away. "You don't get to matter anymore," he said. He turned and walked. They left Marrow alive, tied to a stump with his wounds packed in dirt. Silas scribbled a note and pinned it to his chest. "If you come near them again, I bury you next time." By the time they got back to the ranch, Silas was half conscious, blood loss dragging him sideways. May got him to the porch, screaming for water and thread and whiskey. Old Merla was already there with a needle ready. It took 4 days for him to stand again, 5 before he could speak more than a whisper. In that time, neighbors came. People who'd once kept their distance. People who'd heard about what happened and brought eggs, goats, old preserves. Folks who remembered the boils and wanted to help rebuild. Even the sheriff rode out, not to arrest, but to shake Silas's hand. "You did what we couldn't," he said. "Made sure Marrow won't touch this land again." Silas didn't answer, just looked out over the hills and said, "He'll try. Then we'll be ready," the sheriff said. For the first time, Silas believed him. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Josie came to Silas's side with a book. "Will you read it to me?" He nodded. She climbed onto his lap, careful not to press the bandage on his arm. May sat on the steps nearby, whittling something new, this time a bird. He opened the book, voice rough but steady. It wasn't a fancy story, just a tale about a farmer who saved a fox from a trap and got repaid with a field full of hens. But Josie smiled through every page, and the twins clapped at the end. Eli brought out one of his carvings, a bear this time, and handed it to Silas, without a word. And Silas understood. He wasn't alone anymore. He wasn't a ghost wandering. He had roots, family, fire in his blood that didn't just burn. It warmed, but the peace wouldn't last. Not forever, because some shadows don't burn away in daylight. Some just wait for dusk. And as May stood watching the road that night, her hand brushed the rifle slung across her back, and her voice was a whisper. Only Silas could hear. "He'll be back." Silas didn't argue, but when he looked at her, and then at the children, he knew one thing for certain. Next time, they wouldn't be running. They'd be ready. The wind shifted. That's how it began. No riders, no letters, no boots pounding against soil. Just the wind, tilting strange, curling through the valley like a warning whispered from mountain to root. May felt it first. She always did. Her eyes narrowed against the rising dust as she stood on the porch with Silas, his arms still wrapped in cloth, though the wound had begun to close. "He's coming back," she said. Silas didn't ask how she knew. Some things you didn't question. He followed her gaze to the east where the horizon swam in heat and shimmer. The ground had been dry too long. The last of the creek water was rationed now. Even the weeds looked tired. "How long do you think we've got?" he asked. May shifted her jaw. "Not long." The children were different now, changed in small ways, quieter, more careful, but stronger too. Eli walked with a knife tucked into his boot like it was natural. Josie had started climbing trees for lookout spots. Even the twins could load shells into a shotgun faster than most grown men. Survival had rewired them. But survival wasn't the same as safety, and Silas knew that. He rode into town alone the next morning, didn't tell May, didn't tell the children, just left a note. Time to finish it. Either I end this, or it ends us. He didn't wear his old gun belt, wore his new one instead, the one May had stitched with the initials of the kids, just below the buckle. Not because he was sentimental, because he needed to remember who he was fighting for. He stopped first at the blacksmith, picked up the iron collar they'd made special, thick, sharp-edged, heavy enough to carry meaning. Then the church. Preacher met him at the back door, already dressed in his long coat, Bible under one arm, rifle in the other. "You ain't going alone." Silas looked at him. Preacher added, "Besides, someone's got to bury what's left." They reached the edge of Winder's Bluff by nightfall. Silas had learned where Marrow was holed up, a crumbling fort left from the war, now used as a staging ground for whatever came next. Men filtered in and out. Too many to count. Hired. Drunk. Dangerous. But Silas wasn't counting them. He was counting doors. The only one that mattered was the one at the top of the stairs, where the old command room used to be, where Marrow sat with his maps and his liquor and his hunger. They waited until the storm rolled in. Lightning flicked like a fuse through the sky, thunder cracking the silence open. Then they moved. May showed up an hour later, gun on her hip. "I told the children to lock the doors. They'll be safe." Silas didn't argue, didn't even blink. The three of them, Preacher, May, Silas, slipped through the shadows like they'd done it 100 times. There was no plan. Not really. Just resolve. That was enough. Silas got to the door first, knocked once, just like Marrow had all those years ago. The door creaked open. Marrow sat behind a desk, boots on the wood, eyes gleaming. "Silas," he said, grinning, "I was wondering when you'd stop hiding behind that little family of yours." "I'm not hiding," Silas said, stepping in. "I'm teaching them how to live." Marrow rose slowly. "You want a war?" "No," Silas said. "I want an end." "Then shoot me. I'm not here to kill you." Marrow laughed. "No." "What then?" Silas threw the iron collar onto the desk. It landed with a thud. "You wear that," he said, "or I put it on you myself. You leave this territory. You go east, far east, you vanish, you take your name with you, and if anyone sees you again, they'll know to hang you without asking questions." Marrow stared, then laughed louder. "You think I'm afraid of you?" "No," Silas said. "But I think you're afraid of dying alone, afraid of being forgotten. And you should be." May stepped into the doorway. Rifle raised, Preacher behind her. Marrow looked from face to face and, for the first time, something cracked. Not fear, not guilt. Recognition. He wasn't welcome anywhere anymore. His name had lost its weight. His threats were empty. All he had left was fire and noise, and no one was listening. He reached for the collar, paused, then spat on it, and grabbed his gun. Silas didn't. Shoot him. May did. One clean shot. Not a kill, but it ended him just the same. They left him bleeding but breathing, just enough shame to carry him into exile. Silas didn't say a word as they rode back. Neither did May. Some victories didn't need celebration. Back at the ranch, the wind had shifted again. Cooler now, rain on the air. May stood in the field barefoot as it began to fall, not hard, not heavy, just enough to loosen the dust from the earth and turn it back into something that could grow again. Silas watched from the porch as Eli and Josie ran out into the rain, faces turned to the sky like it was the first miracle they'd ever seen. The twins followed, mud streaking up their legs, laughter breaking free. It didn't feel like a return to peace. It felt like the beginning of something new, something harder, but worth fighting for. They rebuilt the barn with help from the neighbors. Old Tom from down the ridge brought his hammer. Susan Boyle came with pies and stories. The ranch wasn't just a patch of land anymore. It was a home, a hub, a place where hungry folks found food and lost folks found direction. One night, around the fire, Josie asked Silas, "Were you ever scared?" He looked at her. Thought of the war, the graves, the sound of May's voice in the dark after Marrow first came back. "Every day," he said. "Then why didn't you run?" He didn't answer right away. Then, because some things are worth standing still for. May sat beside him, Her hand found his. Josie nodded like she understood, even if she didn't yet. She would. In the months that followed, rumors came. Marrow was seen near the Missouri line, then not seen again. Some said he died in a river fight. Others said he went east, found a new name, became a banker. But to the children at the ranch, he was just a name in a story, a shadow that tried to take their world and failed. Because they had Silas, because they had May, because when the world turned cold, someone had stayed, someone had fed them, fought for them, and refused to let their fire die. The ranch became more than a place to live. It became a promise that no matter how bad the winter, no matter how cruel the hand that fed the powerful, there'd always be one home out there that remembered the hungry, that remembered what it was like to have nothing. Silas planted apple trees in the spring. The children carved their initials into the trunks. May put fresh loaves on the table every Sunday. People came. Some stayed. Some moved on. But none left empty. Because when you give someone warmth, they carry it. And when you give them a reason to hope, they carry that too. The wind still shifts from time to time. But now, when it does, it carries something else with it. Not fear, not warning. Just the sound of hammers, of laughter, of children's feet against the porch floor, and somewhere, always, the smell of bread.